Today, what I wanted to do is I see that so many people in the spiritual space, and the reason I'm doing it here at Pathways is the people here are seekers. You guys have been out there working it, and sometimes a lot changes in a hurry when you get hold of mindfulness, when you get hold of different things. You're like, oh my goodness, why didn't I know all this? And it sounds really good, and it sounds exciting and hopeful. And you get into it and you do a lot of stuff and you pay a lot of people and you read everything, and then there's still there's these holdout places that still haven't shifted and those patterns that are repeating. So I think we have to look at the ways there are some promises out there that aren't working for people. So I'm going to go through those really fast, and if I don't, tell me to go faster because I have to get through them and come back to. And while I'm doing that, though, if you, on the back of your sheet where you're taking notes, if you can think of a situation where something is running for you, where there's a judgment, they should, I should. So maybe turn your thing over and write, they should, I should. Try to catch just any situation where you know, and you put up mother-in-law, whatever that is. And then the other one is just anything that's triggering you. I need them to X. So just sort of as things are coming up, as you're listening, or you're saying, oh my goodness, that's been true for me, that I thought it was this way, and now I'm finding out maybe that doesn't work as well as they told me it would. So just little tiny notes to remind yourself what's coming up. And then if you have questions at the end or a little situation, we can work. Again, I haven't given this talk before, and because there are all 9 of them, and I want to go in order. We do have a recording of this. I don't know how well it'll come out, but if it does come out okay, we can also, if you request it, we can send it to you afterwards if you've given us your name. So, all right, so the number one of them, they're not necessarily in order, as the one misconception or failed promise. So we want to kind of clear these away to open the way to really turn yourself over to this work, because for me, this was the end of seeking. I really could use, I'm either loving life or I'm using what hurts to wake myself up. And then I'm back to loving life. And it's quick. And my clients find it's quick and continue to grow. And even though it happens, change happens so quickly, but they stay with it for years because it's a way to go deeper. It's dependable. No matter how far you've come, there's going to be that thing that'll still trigger you. Okay, you got a live one. That's your path to deepening evolution. So anyway, so the first one of a misconception that most people have as they're growing up is that what another person is saying or doing is creating your pain or reactivity. So if you even want to take notes, and it's just like sort of say, it's the other person's fault. And everybody here, the few people in this room who have even volunteered to come today, some of them to help share this, is you find out it's never the other person. It's never your situation. It's never your bank account. It's never whatever you thought it was. It's your thinking. And of course, a lot of you have heard that and you know that, and yet we'll get to that in number 2. But really what's happening is we're talking about the lens you're looking through. Past childhood wounds, decisions your child, immature brain made. I need to be this, I need to do this. And that's the filter through everything is coming through. And so that's what's creating those patterns. But you can get to a place where you no longer feel like a victim of what other people are doing because you use this simple 4-question or 3-step thing, there's the 2 that I teach, as a way to see how you're doing to yourself exactly what you thought they were doing to you. So we use those triggers that other people have as a mirror into the thinking that we need to transform. And that way others don't have to change. You get to be happy whether or not others change. So a lot of people have brought that to light, that, okay, your feelings are coming out of your thoughts, but a lot of that out in the spiritual space is saying, okay, then let's just get more positive. Let's, like, people will say I remember I got so excited when somebody said, oh my goodness, My thoughts are like a buffet. Just choose different ones. Don't choose this one that makes you feel bad. Choose these other ones. And it was like, okay, sometimes I could do that, but sometimes I couldn't. And so we've got this survival driven programming that's, the trauma, the post-traumatic stress that can even come from a 2-year-old with a very normal family, but something happened where you really got traumatized and it's hooked into your body. So you can't always just affirm over those things. And if you do, that littlest part of you is believing something's really wrong, and it's saying, hey, we need to do something. Let's fix this. And that's what's driving it. And you can't just say, no, everything's fine. Everything's fine. Well, if you do that with a child, they'll just hug your leg and scream louder, and that ends up as chronic illness and relationship dysfunction. So instead, we bring these little thoughts up and let them see the errors in their own logic. So I used to call this heart minding. You care that you're hurting, you become the one who becomes the hero you've been waiting for, and you have to use your conscious mind to expose the errors in its own logic. And then it just falls away. It sees, oh, that was never true to start with. And we use specific situations for that. So the basis of all of that is whether you're judging or you're turning yourself into a pretzel trying to please and placate others, the basis is that you didn't create the thoughts. So I'm about to, in some of my books that are just coming out, going up against a lot of that spiritual party line that says, just choose different thoughts, is like, no, the thoughts just pop up. You don't say, oh, I think I'm going to decide to think this now. No, it wasn't conscious. It's a convergence of programming, stimulus from the outside, all that habitual wiring in your brain. So that's a really important part of self-forgiveness, is to see, oh, I didn't create the thought that caused me to act the way I acted. Therefore, I can find my own innocence. And what we need to do is go back and work on that thought, not just beat myself up over and over again. Hold yourself, find your innocence, see that you were doing the best you could in every given moment. But, let's work through the thought that keeps making these patterns happen over and over again. So number 2, just to reverse, to go back again, since our emotions are generated by our thinking, a lot of people would say it means you're choosing to be upset. Oh, he was choosing to act like a victim. Or no, and nobody really wants to be those ways. We really don't choose that stuff. It's kind of just, it's the best we can do. So the third one is, if you just practice mindfulness and become the observer of your thoughts and feelings, your difficult situations will turn around. So, wow, getting aware of the idea of mindfulness is phenomenal, and it's such a big step ahead to move into being the observer of the thinking rather than the believer. I mean, that's huge. And lots of times that's not enough, because, you can watch it, think of it as a cloud floating by. Okay, and tomorrow that same thought is back, because you never really re-educated that thought. So that's what we're doing here. We're actually dissolving, neutralizing the emotional charge, rewiring the brain with this, and I call it beyond mindfulness. And again, thoughts like, I should, I need them to, I want them to. And that's partly based on the work of Byron Katie, in which I'm one of about 150 people in the whole world that's certified in that work, and it has to do with these 4 questions where we turn around the thoughts. So it really is important, again, to go beyond mindfulness. So one of my little happiness hacks books is called Beyond Mindfulness, and it came out of me living through chronic illnesses where doctors kind of gave up, and they're like, I don't know. I really had to go in and learn how to be with the thoughts as they were, be with the thinking, but I still didn't know what to do with them until I had this work. So number 4, failed promise or misconception, is you should not think, write, say, or in any way put the focus on negative or scarcity thoughts, because you will manifest that. They've actually worked with people that were traumatized by the law of attraction theory because they were so afraid that if they couldn't get rid of their negative thoughts, they didn't know how, affirming over them wasn't working, and yet they were so afraid that they were causing the very outcomes they didn't want for themselves. And they were blaming themselves all the time for the things that were happening. Well, if I wasn't so negative, and if I weren't, and it was like, no, if you could have done better, you would have. And, we get that it's not your fault. You didn't ask for these situations. It's not your fault because there was a model in your childhood that usually included blame and shame. If you had known another way, you would have done it, but you didn't. And again, it's not your fault that you didn't create the thinking. So the failed promise and misconception number 5 is you just need to stop judging and having expectations. I mean, I can't tell you the number of sermons I've heard that are saying, the path out is just stop judging. It's true, but how do you stop judging? Yes, if you can drop all your expectations and release yourself of judgment of yourself and others, great. But I never knew how. It didn't matter how much I wanted to or understood that would help. And so now we have a way, because we use the fact that our brain is a judging machine. And we get those judgments on paper where we can observe them, because the ego is a really tricky thing, and it'll go, oh, I didn't really mean that. And, you start to expose what it's doing to save you. It's always innocent. It's always trying to save you, but it can look pretty nasty and pretty judgmental of yourself or others. And when we get it on paper, with a very structured process where we go ahead and judge away. I'm upset with blank because these are the 6 things. I want them to, they should, I need them to, they are, and I don't ever want to experience blank around this again. So that's called the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet of the work. And when you know what to do with the judgments, then it's great. Get them on paper, say them out loud, observe them, because they are your path out. If you keep stuffing them down and saying, no negativity, no scarcity thoughts. I even saw somebody who was giving a talk saying, and you set your sights on that mission, no matter what. And if part of you says a yes, but, you zip that, tie its hands. It's like, no, that's part of you. You need to help it out with its beliefs. So again, there's really only one thought behind all emotional pain, and that is the thought, something to the effect of, I'll only be happy if, I'll only feel safe if you hug me for 3 seconds longer, if you hold me when I cry, if you stop yelling at me, and it turns out that you can be safe and happy and free in all these situations, but your mind created a condition. So it's an I need thought. I need life to. I need them to. I need my bank account to. So these conditional thoughts, guess what? It's really easy to see through them when you use this structure. Is it true? You need that? Can you absolutely know that's what you need? Sort of like you realize that the area of what anybody needs is sort of like God's business, outside of the realm of what you are in control of. And you see all the times when you thought you were getting not what you needed, and it turned into the best thing ever. So you start to recognize the limits of your own mind and see how it's only those conditions. And so we neutralize those conditions pretty easily with this work. And that brings us to failed promise number 6, that unconditional love is only attainable by spiritual masters like Jesus or Buddha. And I see, anytime I work with someone, anytime at the end of a private session or a group thing in a retreat where somebody works through something, and they can come in feeling like that other person is the enemy, feeling so victimized, so hurt, so scared, so angry. And by the end of the session, they are loving that person exactly as they are. They are seeing that situation or that person as their greatest teacher. And life will bring you, even though I've come so far in those areas. My great teacher right now is my next door neighbor. And so I'm still, I have to work what's bringing what story have I got that's making me feel disempowered and clueless how to deal with his aggression. Anyway, so it's kind of like when you feel clueless, usually means childhood wound. You were a child, you were dependent on that person, you didn't have choices, you interpreted whatever, your parent was just busy and overwhelmed that day, but or it might be much worse. Either way, you felt you didn't know. So that when you carry those into adulthood, but we were helping to grow those little parts of ourselves. I always say it's kind of like you have this part of yourself that's going, I need this, and we say, I need to get them to take care of this part of me. So you hand it over, and they're like, I don't want that part of you. And so they sit it on the floor, and the baby is on the floor crying, and instead of just picking it up, you try to get them to pick it up. And that's kind of codependence. And so this work is about you're picking it up, you're getting it in a snugly, and when you've got that for a baby, it doesn't matter how anybody else is behaving. You're not going to let them hurt the baby, and you only hand the baby off to the people that you truly trust. So that's part of this unconditional thing, is realizing, yes, they can be the way they are, and I'm going to be the self-contained one, which I'm taking care of this. It is not just my responsibility, but my sacred privilege to help these littlest parts of me who are still driven by these thoughts. So number 7 is beating yourself up and being hard on yourself is a way to improve. So that is not only a thing that a lot of us got hold of when we were little, especially if we were around a parent who was unconfrontable, and it wouldn't have been safe to point the finger back at them as the problem. So of course we thought they were the evolved ones, and even though children are often more evolved than the person in front of them because they haven't started believing all their thinking yet. But so we told ourselves, if I just am hard on myself and I look for what I might have done wrong and I, replay the situation, shoulda, woulda, coulda, that was my own hell. I call it regret hell, that I would leave any meeting at work, any conversation with a loved one, and beat myself up for what I could have, should have said different, and blame myself for their responses. So a lot of us are taking way too much responsibility for the fact that other people have their programming going on too, and that their response to you is theirs, and that beating yourselves up doesn't actually create positive change. It just tears you down. It's you abandoning you. It's you neglecting and criticizing you and never letting you be enough. So when you start to see your own innocence and become your own cheerleader and use this wheel of self-forgiveness to say, yes, I see you. You were doing the best you could in that moment, given what you're believing. Everything starts to change, including the people around you. They realize you're not putting your needs in their hands anymore, and they start to get permission to also be who they are, and you're big enough to hold them as they are. So number 8 is that if you are chronically indecisive, it's because you fear making the wrong choice. And that is, that's based on the fallacy that your mind knows what would be best or worst in any given situation, which it doesn't, because sometimes the worst things can turn into the best things. But if you're indecisive or stuck and afraid to move, it's not so much being afraid of making the wrong choice, I found, is being afraid of that you will be hard on yourself, that you will be stuck in that loop of regret, that no matter what the outcome is, and I ask people, okay, and what's the worst thing about that? And they say that. What's the worst thing about that? And they say that. What's the worst thing about that? In the end, the worst thing is that they will blame themselves for what happened. So as soon as you know how not to blame yourself, then decisions become easy. You do the best you can with the information that you had. But I never knew that, so it was really so helpful. Okay, and we're coming up on number 9, that you need to keep seeking and trying different things. and that it will require years of somatic release and processes to get things out of your body. I had all those years of processes, and they were amazing, and the people that did them were amazing, and yet they kept coming back because the thoughts kept reinstituting the pathways that were creating what I was holding in my body. So it was really helpful to be able to rewire the thinking, and then guess what? The stuff in my body disconnected. There was nothing there to set up those old patterns that were causing the chakras to shut down. And and yes, I'm not minimizing the effects of trauma at all levels, and yet from my perspective, you can really unravel that by working even pre-language trauma, by working the thoughts that are happening now, because what's happening now is like the manifestation of what got started back then. So as you work the here and now, it goes back to that initial wound when maybe you didn't realize what you were coming to believe and what was happening there, and you got hold of some kind of reaction that's all tangled up in your body. So it's really amazing to be able to just watch the thread of whatever is getting to you. So that's the 9,